You know, first of all, there's not a ban; it's a license requirement, which in theory you could get approved. But this was the event that this happened was not surprising. Maybe the timing was, and the magnitude this time around was much larger. Nvidia has gone through multiple of such sanctions to China. And every time, you know, they have to take some revenue hit because they could not ship some products. This time around, over the last few quarters, China has been creeping up as a percentage of data center, getting close to sort of 10% in our estimate of as of last quarter. So the magnitude now continues to increase. And I think the charge, the $5.5 billion charge, which we think implies to about 14 to 18 billion dollars of revenue that they could have shipped, implies there was some definite demand pull-in anticipation of such restrictions.
So wait, let me just fine tune. So not a ban, forgive me. So licensing, so what does that just mean? Another document or something? Like, what's the distinction? Because you obviously made it because it's an important one. What is that distinction?
Yeah, the prior restrictions on the Hopper family have come as sanctions where the US government comes and just says you cannot ship this product to China, period. And you have to develop a new product that satisfies those conditions. This time around, it's licensing where they can still ship H20 in theory if they get a license for each respective customer to ship to China.
Okay, important distinction. Thanks for explaining that. I want to bring in Ed Ludlow, who follows, of course, the space closely and specifically asked about this H20 technology. Sure. Ed, what is the technology that is being restricted at this point, and where could Chinese companies and where do Chinese companies want to use this tech?
Yeah, it's a so-called AI accelerator or high-performance GPU and other components that go into a system that largely are involved in the process of either training a large language model or, more relevant to H20 and the anxiety of this US administration, inference. The H20 is a lower performance chip relative to like the cutting edge of what NVIDIA does.
So it's the Hopper and not the Blackwell, right?
It's just a variant, right?
Okay.
It's a prior generation to Blackwell. It's on a slightly different architecture. Blackwell, we can go into the specifics of why it's different, but all that you need to understand from a sort of markets perspective, and also like the political equation here, is that it doesn't do as much as the cutting edge accelerators that NVIDIA makes. But there's still anxiety from this administration that China could use it in the context of an AI supercomputer, and that they will try and argue presents a national security risk. And Kunjan's analysis is absolutely fundamental. You guys asked the right question. What's the distinction on a license and why a $5.5 billion write-down? A $5.5 billion write-down because NVIDIA probably knows it ain't going to get a license. Why else would you do the write-down and just clear that inventory off your desk? They kind of seem to have a sense of where this is headed.
So Kunjan, I mean, and I love what, you said where this is headed, Ed, because I do feel like the devil's in the details, and we keep seeing different things in terms of, I feel like, the semiconductor world, but it does feel like this administration, bottom line, is going to continue to put some kind of restrictions in different ways. Is that a fair assumption? Is that a bad assumption?
Well, that is definitely a fair assumption. And look, the writing has been on the wall even before this administration steps in, right? That for the AI, the high-end AI semi-makers, the China market TAM is just continuing to shrink, and it will continue to shrink as we think even prior and this administration continue to sort of block or limit the amount of highest end performing chips that China can get access to.
Does it matter, Ed, in the long run? For China's AI ambitions, does this just slow China down, or does this actually hamper what they're trying to do? I mean, look what happened with DeepSeek.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, even though the write-down on that inventory of H20s is indicative that NVIDIA knows the door's closing in that market, they could always come back with an even lower spec chip that is within the parameters of the restrictions as they understand them. One really interesting paradox here is the side effect of the White House's policy, which is that China does have some options, right? The context is that in the world of AI, 50% of the research is being done out of China. Literally 50% of all AI researchers are Chinese or Chinese citizens working somewhere around the world. But they have access to other technology. Huawei is increasingly becoming the national champion of China. It does not have a Blackwell, the highest performance chip that Nvidia produces, but it does have something akin to the H20. And so now China has the ammunition, and poor word, the motivation to champion its own domestic player and say, you know what, have a leg up. Let's use your H20 equivalent instead.
So interesting. It was the exact conversation I was having with a colleague a little earlier, Ed. Kunjan, I want to bring you back in here because you're also watching AMD. Shares down 9.2%, 9.3% as we speak. The company said it expects to take a charge of as much as $800 million after the Trump administration put new restrictions on semiconductor exports to China. What is the AMD product that we're talking about here?
Well, AMD also has a similar watered-down version that it was going to ship to China. It's called the 308 versus the 300 series that it's shipping everywhere else. The impact on AMD, the number for AMD were surprising to us in terms of the exposure that we didn't think it had to China. I think when you look at apples to apples, the AMD will be impacted a lot more than Nvidia here, because sort of when you think about the lower tier or the pre-Blackwell version of GPUs, this is where AMD competes with Nvidia. And we thought, given the price competitiveness in China, this is where AMD could gain a little bit higher share than in the US. So blocking this off for AMD to China will impact it worse. Again, the scale is pretty different when you compare to Nvidia and AMD.
So what I want to ask you guys, and let me go to you first, Ed. I mean, I just feel like the news out of the chip sector, I'm looking at the stocks, it's just getting hammered. All the names are down. I talked about Nvidia, AMD, both down about 9% here in today's session. And we're looking at an index that is down about 6%. And we're down, 35% from peak to trough. I mean, is it just a normal semiconductor cycle that has, as you know, that Ian King talks about, its highs and lows? Or is it a really major rethink of AI? Or is it just overall kind of market malaise and uncertainty?
It's probably a rethink of supply chain, and it's really been good to learn about how the semiconductor industry works, right? This is where we tie in ASML. ASML was not under pressure because of technology export restrictions. That was a tariff story. But essentially, the thing that they have in common is that America wants the absolute cutting or leading edge innovation to be kept to America. It doesn't want China to have access. ASML does not make chips. It makes the equipment that makes the chips. But their specific equipment, extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, are $300 million a piece, and they are crucial to making those cutting edge chips. What the company told us this morning is we don't know what's going to happen. We cannot quantify it because it's more expensive doing business in America. ASML already does quite a lot here, but it assembles its final product in the Netherlands, and it has some Asia supply chain. So if you're a CEO, whether you're a chip maker, a chip equipment maker, or a designer, you now face a very simple calculus. It's going to be more expensive for you to do business in America, 25 to 35%. That's just the cost of doing things here. Or you face doing things in a jurisdiction in Asia, which we don't know the tariff on yet because of the temporary White House reprieve. That's different to market anxiety. Market fluctuations don't reflect the fluctuations that are happening within these companies right now as they try to assess how they're going to change their business models.
Kunjan, finally, final 30 seconds here in terms of your thoughts here as we look at what's going on in the overall semi space.
I mean, look, I've been in this space for 20 years, and at every beginning of every cycle, we say this is a different cycle, and at the exit of it, we say, no, the outcome was still the same, no matter what the drivers. There is definitely something different here where a lot of global geopolitics get involved. Put in context that last year we were sort of peak of valuations. The growth in AI was just increasing tremendously, which we know cannot be sustainable. So yes, the drivers this time look different for the cycle, but maybe the outcome might be still similar to what we have seen.